It looks like the media has finally gotten the war between Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren that they have been wanting. Now, this all started with a report by Politico. Now, that Politico report included written guidelines for Sanders volunteers calling potential voters who might support other candidates. So now there's supposedly a script, right? And in this script, Sanders volunteers are advised to characterize Warren supporters as highly educated and affluent. Well, okay, already I don't seem to see the problem. It's kind of like a, hey, your supporters are highly educated and affluent. It means they're really smart people and they're wealthy. Okay. And what's the problem with that? Well, that's an image problem for Elizabeth Warren, who claims that she's fighting for the working class and the middle class. Oh, now look, she does a lot better than a lot of the other establishment candidates, but certainly there is one candidate that does have the support of the working class, and that's Bernie Sanders. So now, uh, here's the thing. So now, you look at that, right, and you wonder where's the lie. You look at the demographics in Warren's support, and that's generally true: affluent, highly educated, and actually white. Now, Bernie Sanders has a younger, more diverse set of supporters from working class backgrounds. For example, you have a lot of servers, and you have a lot of warehouse workers, right? So those are the people that back Bernie Sanders. So there must be something else in that script that is completely outrageous. Well, okay, I'm going to read it. I'm going to read it. So here's how it starts. I like Elizabeth Warren, and that's of course optional, right? In fact, she's my second choice. But here's my concern about her. People who support her are highly educated, more affluent people who are going to show up and vote Democratic no matter what. She's bringing no new bases into the Democratic Party. So now, where's the lie, right? Sanders does better with independents, and even some Republicans have voiced a willingness to vote for Bernie Sanders. Him being an independent and not as well attached to the Democratic Party and being able to push back against the Democratic Party, well, that actually is pretty advantageous if you're trying to build onto the Democratic Party, bring more people into it. So, and not alienate them, right? So, okay, it continues. We need to turn out disaffected working class voters if we're going to beat Trump. The script section on Warren concludes. So, wait, where's the attack on Elizabeth Warren? Where's the trash? Where's the trash? All they did was cite demographic data that is easily verifiable. How dare they? How dare they attack the Honorable Elizabeth Warren? Slime her with such facts. Now, look, Warren responded to this, and she said, I was disappointed to hear that Bernie is sending out his volunteers to trash me. Bernie knows me and has known me for a long time. He knows who I am, where I come from, what I've worked on and fought for, and the coalition and grassroots movements we're trying to build. Now, there's more to that, but first, okay. So, look, I read you that script. Does that sound like trash to you? Well, no. Again, this is the same thing Politico has been saying for months. But no, sending his supporters. First of all, there's no evidence that Bernie Sanders was the one who said, do this script against Elizabeth Warren. Again, no evidence. And by the way, Bernie Sanders has never said anything publicly bad against Elizabeth Warren. He just hasn't. So I don't understand. Now, further, she goes, and this is, by the way, this is, this whole thing reeks of Consultant 101, right? And you're gonna see that. She said, Democrats want to win in 2020. We all saw the impact of the factionalization in 2016, and we can't have a repeat of that. Democrats need to unite our party, and that means pulling in all parts of the Democratic coalition. So she is basically repeating the lie, the smear that it was Bernie Sanders supporters that are dividing the party. This Bernie Sanders, he's dividing the party. We need party unity, and that Bernie Sanders is dividing the parties, making it easier for Donald Trump to win. Now, that again, that is pure and utter BS, garbage. And speaking of garbage, again, there's no trashing Elizabeth Warren in this. That's not saying anything negative about Elizabeth Warren. Again, this goes back to what Politico has been saying for quite some time. As Politico explained last July, Warren and Sanders' bases of support are somewhat distinct, despite their relative political proximity. More highly educated voters were more likely to support Warren, while lower income voters with less education more often supported Sanders. In September, the Washington Post attributed that to Warren's wonkish, policy-focused campaign style. That is mainstream corporate media saying the same thing that this script had said. Well, now, does that mean Politico was trashing Elizabeth Warren? Does that mean the Washington Post was trashing Elizabeth Warren? Or again, they're now using that to slam Bernie Sanders. 538 also talked about this in October. They said that Warren is doing particularly well with white, college-educated voters and starting to expand her base by making inroads with non-white voters without a college degree and more moderate voters. Bernie Sanders, of course, leads when it comes to non-white voters. Or actually, he's behind Joe Biden when it comes to non-white voters. But again, younger, diverse voters tend to go for Bernie Sanders. So now, a poll, by the way, later that month, still found that her supporters were more likely to be white, wealthy, and college educated. So, do we start calling them Warren Bros? Is that permitted now? I mean, they used that same smear against Bernie Sanders back in 2016. So maybe fair is fair, right? If we're actually now the campaigns are at war, which they seem to have instigated, then maybe that's fair. The Warren Bros. All right. Anyway, so now following this, 4 anonymous supporters of Warren then claimed that Bernie Sanders told her to her face that a woman can't win an election. So again, that's more allegations of sexism, right? That, of course, is incredibly poor sourcing. None of these people were actually in the room, and it looks to have been made up. But these allegations of sexism, first, thrown out there by the Hillary Clinton campaign and her staffers, continue to be lobbed at Sanders, and they continue to stick, despite Sanders' record on women's issues and video of him saying all the way back in the 80s that women could definitely run for president and become president. So now Bernie Sanders responds to this, and he calls it a media blow-up. Quote, "We have hundreds of employees. Elizabeth Warren has hundreds of employees. And the people sometimes say things they shouldn't. You have heard me give many speeches. Have I ever said one negative word about Elizabeth Warren? No, he hasn't. And as for the script, they're trying to verify its authenticity. First of all, there's no evidence that it was put there by Bernie Sanders. Now, Eric Isaac, a Kings County Democratic Committee on Twitter, tweeted this out. Here's what happened. A random user who's ever only posted once posted that document in a Sanders volunteer Slack group. A moderator promptly removed it and stated that it was not a campaign source. Despite, of course, mainstream reporters saying, oh, look, it's an official Bernie document. It's even got the paid for by Bernie, not the billionaires thing on it. It's legit. Well, look, even if it was, who cares? It's pretty innocuous. There's nothing negative about Warren. And again, that's exactly who her base is. White, wealthy, highly educated liberals. That's a fact. That's a fact. And look, she's doing way better with minorities than Pete Buttigieg, which, by the way, the script goes after Pete Buttigieg not having a lot of black supporters because of what he did in South Bend. And so, look, this is factual information. The fact is that Elizabeth Warren would use this to accuse Bernie Sanders of trashing her and not defend Sanders against the baseless charges of sexism it really does show you who Elizabeth Warren really is. Her statement on the dinner, she said, quote, "I want to keep it a private conversation." Yeah, she's the one person who could set the record straight and instead puts out a BS statement. We're done with Warren. That shows who she is. And look, I understand this is a primary, right? And the whole point of the primary is to distinguish yourself to the voters. That script, real or not, is perfectly fine. The accusations of sexism, which likely came from her consultants, many of whom were former Clinton staffers, is the epitome of dirty politics. She's getting terrible advice, and what's worse is since that she's declining in the polls, she decided to take it. But you know what? You know what actually helped her decline in the polls? Made sure that she lost out on ground? Because she walked away from her policies. I know you can say, oh, but she still believes in Medicare for all. I don't believe so. Because she has a plan, public option first, and then 3 years later, introduce another piece of legislation to do a full Medicare for all. No, you only do that if you're not serious about getting this done. Anyone in politics knows that once you get into office, and if you get there on a mandate, right, and you say, this is what I'm going to do, you push for it, and you spend all your political capital on your one primary policy objective. And in this case, if Elizabeth Warren really cared about Medicare for all, she wouldn't set up two different fights because, let's be honest, no politician will have that kind of political capital to first spend it on a massive overhaul, adding a public option, and then an even more massive overhaul to a single-payer system. That's bad politics and bad politicking. And so that makes me feel like she is not actually serious about that plan. And it's deeply disappointing. Deeply, deeply disappointing. Which, by the way, is why Refund Warren was trending #1 on Twitter. That's a movement of people that are posting screenshots demanding that, and just like what they did with Pete Buttigieg, they demand their refunds from Act Blue. People that had given to, Elizabeth Warren after this disastrous, disgusting smear against Bernie Sanders are saying, we want our money back. And by the way, the day before, I Trust Bernie was also trending #1. So, look, there are a lot of people that were fooled into thinking Elizabeth Warren was not just another standard politician. And look, I even like some of her policies, right? I don't think they've gone far enough. And I like the fact that she's fought the banks. But in reality, it turns out that she, again, just like the others, is a standard politician who doesn't have as strong as a core as a lot of us believed she did. Well, at least now that's over. And going into Iowa and New Hampshire, being able to make that distinction and separate Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren, well, that's going to end up being a good thing for Bernie Sanders. Hey guys, hopefully you enjoyed that free video. Now I'm going to have to ask you a favor. Between the demonetization and the YouTube algorithm messing around with view counts, etc., we're having a hard time adjusting to the new YouTube reality, which is where you guys come in. See, we have a Patreon, patreon.com/TYTNation, set up to help us rely on you guys, the viewers, instead of big corporate ads. Look, you know the show. You know I'm not in favor of big corporations anyway. So help us transition away from relying on the ad model to pay the bills and sign up to be a patron, patreon.com/TYTNation. That goes a long way to help us keep the lights on. And you guys will know that you're supporting independent progressive media.